Alrighty, what we're doing right now is we're gonna try figure out how to mount this little hot rod together. Not sure how I'm gonna put this in here yet. What we're gonna do for mounts, not even 100% sure at what angle this thing is supposed to be mounted at. I'm gonna go with maybe that's level crankcase. That's sitting level like that, I believe. Not 100% sure. I'm gonna do a little more research on it, but I want to make sure it's sitting there right so I don't have any oiling issues. I mean, it's designed as a replacement dirt bike engine, so you can probably tip it upside down and it still run, but we don't want any issues with oiling. So alright, I'm gonna get this thing set up, see if I can get some pieces cut, and then see if we can get her hung in there. So this bushing right here is a piece I had left over. I got a couple of these. I had them left over from a old Firebird restoration, and what I want to do is use these for my rear suspension hangers, and I want the center of my pivot, my rear suspension, to be center of my chain sprocket. And the reason for that is when my chain is sitting here riding and my suspension's traveling up and down, I don't want it to change the slack in my chain. If you notice on a lot of older ATVs that ran a chain, their rear suspension pivot was behind the sprocket. And what that does is it's actually a poor design, because as the suspension comes up, you create slack in your chain, and when your suspension goes down, it pulls tight on your chain, so your chain is constantly in and out of proper adjustment as your suspension's traveling up and down. And what I want to do is eliminate that action on this little rig. So by putting it center of the sprocket where the chain rides here, you're not going to have anything other than constant tension on your chain going up and down, so your chain's not going to get shorter and longer, so you're not going to get herky-jerky yanking on it like that. So that's I gotta keep that in mind as I'm mounting this engine in here. Another thing we gotta take into consideration is where the seat is actually gonna sit in the cockpit, so that when it's fully adjusted back, that you're within the parameters of the roll cage. And so when you're fully forward, you're also still in the parameters of the roll cage, and that your seat isn't going to hit your motor engine. That's going to put our drive back behind the chassis a little further. I'm going to come out here with a little addition to our chassis here a little bit, and that'll actually work out well. I found these holes on the bottom that I'm actually going to use as mounting point, and build a little plate across there so we can bolt that in. Utilize those couple holes in the bottom there. So there's 1, 2, 4 points of contact on the bottom, one here and one here. That way we know that the thing's not going to fall out of there on us. use every bolt hole possible. That's my theory. Make her sturdy. So, here's a little issue we have. That's the center line of the chassis. Right there, that mark on the plywood. Now, where my axle rides, this is going to be, that mark there is going to be center line of my axle sprocket. So that means where my engine sprocket is, I've got to move this over that far. In order to do that, I have chassis in my way. So that's going to be a little dilemma at the moment. And not sure how I'm going to do that yet. We're just going to cut here, probably up here, and rebend a piece, weld a new piece in there to get around that the way I want it to be. Not really sure yet, but we'll see how it turns out. So here's the solution I came up with. I don't know if it's really a solution at this point yet or not. With this little piece of chassis that I cut out of here, I flipped it around, notched it on the bottom, flipped over, tacked it back in there, added a piece here across my rear cross member, which my engine is now sitting in the chassis where it needs to. You want to make sure all this stuff is square so everything, you don't have any side tension on your chain or anything like that. And now I've got to figure out how I'm going to cope everything back in on this side as well. I think it's all going to work out. I just want to go over quick one thing. A few tools you're going to need to do this little process. Good tubing cutter, you know, a third hand, you know, just to hold parts down or whatever. Vice grips, or that little deal works pretty good. Marking pencil, a square. You're gonna need a welder. You don't need anything that elaborate. You can get a cheap little inverter welder. It's gonna do the same job. And I got this piece in there, another scrap piece that I saved. I don't throw anything away. I always save the little pieces because you never know. So I got that piece. This piece here fits right in there nice. I'll weld that right in place. And I didn't make that in one shot. It took me a couple times. I cut it, I made it long, and then ground it to fit. I don't have a tube and notcher. Tube and notcher would be nice for this project, but you can do it with a grinder. You know, a good grinder. Don't buy a $20 grinder and think that it's going to last for any period of time, because I've actually had cheap grinders. I'd have the gearbox actually come apart, pieces of crap flying in your face. And that being said, you also want a good pair of safety glasses and probably some gloves. Not a bad idea. So you don't want to get this crap in your eye, because nobody wants to look like a pirate. That looks kind of outdated and all, but pirates are cool and all, but you know, it's easier to build these projects when you have both eyeballs, you know, so keep that in mind. Alright, so what I'm doing here, since I don't have a tube and notcher, and this is kind of the most important, most precise part of this whole system, is the distance from this bottom frame point to the center of the sprocket on the engine, which is the distance from here to the center of the sprocket is 3 3/16, 13/16. So what I've done is I've fastened this piece of pipe to a board, put my pilot hole, center my pilot hole here at 3 13/16. Now I'm going to take a hole saw, since I don't have a Tobin notcher, the same size as the outside of this pipe, and I'm going to attempt to drill and cut this at the perfect radius so that will sit into it like a little saddle. And I'm going to make 2 of those, one for either side, and this pipe will sit into those where they need to be, and then I'll make 2 more for the top and see how that goes. Well, and if you don't have the right tools, just be really careful, because you don't want to lose a finger or something. Anyway, let you know. So that actually worked really well. Once I figured out the correct speed to run the bit at, I had to adjust that a little bit, but yeah, smoked through that thing. Worked perfect. We might be making all our notches like this. That works freaking wicked. Alright. Alright. So those little saddles actually worked out pretty good. I'm set up on my center line. So I'm going to make a couple welds here, 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 and here. And I'm probably going to weld these solid. Normally I just tack stuff, but I'm going to weld these solid because I don't want them to move at all. I'm going to get that all braced all the way that however it's going to be. And then I'm actually going to cut it right there. I'll leave it all solid, you know, so when I cut it, it'll be where it's going to be, and then I'll have a straight line through those 2 points, and then go from there. So now I think I got everything lined up the way I want it. I got this piece of cardboard in here because I've scribed it around, and what I'll do is I'll transfer that shape onto a piece of sheet metal or like a 1/8" steel, so I can build a motor mount. Not sure how that's gonna play out yet, but got an old piece of sway bar out an old truck out back. Use that for some support in the back. Got it just tacked in there for now. I don't know if that's gonna stay or not. I may just leave it in there and cope it right in, or make some gussets or whatever. Like in here, I'll build a little gusset that fits right in here, nice and neat, and this will be all solid in here then. And I'll do the same thing on this side. I'm not sure exactly if that's gonna come up like that or like that. Whatever I do, there'll be a gusset in here as well. Maybe both sides. Have a gusset down here. Make it strong. This is really going to be our weak point. But I think I could probably build a small gusset to fit in there as well. I don't want to have clearance issues. That's all. But I want to put as many pieces in there as possible to make it tough. So, you know, we'll have to do some gusseting in here as well. Keep things from twisting. Again, up here in the top, probably do another crossbar that goes right through our motor mount. There'll actually be 2 motor mounts. And it'll go right through both pieces. It'll tie all that together, and then you'll set the motor up in there and bolt it in. I think it'll be pretty structurally sound then. This is all this is all stuff you can do your own self, guys. I mean, I'm not a professional by any means. We're gonna hillbillyify this thing a little bit. Might be a little jerry-rigged, as my sister likes to say. I take offense to that. But anyway, it's coming along. I think I made some progress today. Running out of materials, running out of steam, running out of motivation. Really. But this is cool. Came a long way today. Doesn't look like much, but I got some hours involved here. Gonna take some time to make it pretty, but this thing is gonna be cool, man. Like I said, it's all stuff you can do your own self.